The road is long, but well worth traveling. So, time for another of my little self-indulgences. I'm going to talk about why it's awesome, and I'm going to stick to video games this time, but I am also going to depart from the last couple of video games I've talked about for why it's awesome, because those were 16-bit games from the Super Nintendo, and most of the time I talk about video games on why it's awesome, that's what they're going to be. That was my heyday as a gamer, and those are most of my favorite games. And I've mentioned before, I don't have a current gen gaming system. I have a PS3. That's as current as I get. I don't plan to get a current gen gaming system, and I don't have a computer that could support modern games either. So I'm not up to date with games, but there is a game that I played on the PS3 that I want to talk about, because it was an amazing experience to play through, and that was Journey. I had heard a lot of great things about Journey, but I hadn't really dug into a ton of the details about it. I knew it was kind of sort of multiplayer, not really. I knew that. I knew that it was very minimalistic in its storytelling. That was kind of it, though. So I popped it in, and I sat down to play, thinking that I would do what I tend to do with a lot of video games, especially these days, is I'll play for a little bit and get a sense of, how much time I'm prepared to devote to this, because my time to play video games these days is really sporadic, which makes finishing games really hard, because sometimes I can find myself without the time to plug back into them for weeks, and then I've lost the rhythm. So I thought I was just going to sit down and just get a feel for the thing. 2.5 hours later, when I finished it, I'm just sitting there in a trance. And if you've never played Journey, 2.5 hours sounds really short. What's the point? It's the perfect length for what the game is and what the game is doing. Because it's not a particularly challenging game. I'm not going to say it's challenge-free, but it's not excessively difficult to get through. I got through without dying. I got through on my first playthrough. And I do believe that is the intention of the game, that you pop it in and you play it all the way through continuously, and you have a 2 to 3 hour continuous experience. And I did, and it was amazing. So what is so good about this? Well, let's start with the look. It is a wonderfully visually realized world. And actually, there was a point, I don't know if it's about halfway in, or yeah, I'm gonna say about halfway in, where there's a sequel, because you start out in a desert, and there's just a mountain in the distance. Go up that mountain. The game doesn't even really tell you that. It's well, there's nowhere else to go. Off we go on a journey up the mountain, and you start in a very deserty environment. And there's a point where you start to go through some ruins, and your character's kind of sliding down this thing, and the camera rotates, so it's not behind you anymore. Now it's to the side, so you're in silhouette, and the sun is shining through, and it is glistening off the sand, and it seriously took my breath away. And it's not just because of how gorgeous the visual is, it's because of the seamless transition to it. This was not a cutscene. I wasn't extracted from gameplay in order to get this. It was perfectly integrated moment into the organic gaming that was already going on, and it left me speechless. It was gorgeous, and the game as a whole is gorgeous. It is not just, this sort of bright sandy thing. You get you get atmospheric, foreboding areas. The tail end of it, the very ending stretch, is so tense, in large part due to the visual presentation of it. There is a story, or rather there's a backstory that you can learn, and I do think I more or less got it, but that wasn't what I was invested in. I wasn't invested in the why things are like this now. I was really invested in getting my character, my avatar, just this little voiceless character that can just emote like a single note and a long scarf up this mountain. I got really invested in that. Despite the fact that it's not really your avatar is not really characterized at all. Like, I shouldn't get that invested, but I was seriously invested, and I was afraid for him. There are a couple points where there are enemies, and you can't fight them. You can't fight these things. You need to avoid them at all costs. And I was scared of these things because I didn't want the journey to end. I sure as heck didn't want it to end like that at the hands of these things. And so, just trying to avoid them was so tense because I was so wrapped up on it. And there's a point where you get out of sort of the darkened areas and your character is practically flying, and there's these gorgeous waterfalls, and it is this wonderful moment of triumph, and it's not even the end of the game. And then it goes into the final stretch, and I'm kind of getting into spoilers if you haven't played this game yet, so be aware of that. I'm about to keep talking, so yeah, spoilers. And you get to the tail end of the thing, and there's the mountain, the snowy peak of the mountain, and the blinding snow, and seeing how hard, well, not only seeing your character pushing against the wind, and like feeling how hard it is, how little, like you're leaning so hard on the analog stick, trying to get him to move further, and he's slowing down, and you can feel how hard it is becoming. You just want to get there. And all of this enhanced by the weird kind of sort of multiplayer, because the game will pair you up with other gamers in the same section that you're in, and you'll see them and they'll see you. You can't really reasonably interact, but you don't start seeing these things for about a half hour into the game. So it's just been you in the desert initially, but then like there's somebody else. Oh, and you can kind of interact a little. You can signal your music note, they can signal theirs. It's kind of like a, hey, over here, hey, look, I found this thing that boosts health, or hey, I found the way that leads us to the next bit. And you develop a relation, like you get invested. Not only do you get invested in your own faceless, uncharacterized avatar, you get invested in your traveling companions. Like when I was playing, and it's the very end of the game, and you're trudging through the snow, the other player who I was with started to fall behind, and I felt terrible. I was too afraid that my character would not be able to keep going if I tried to slow down for this other guy to catch up. So I kept going forward, but as I lost sight of him, as in the blinding snows, and I'm losing sight, I'm thinking to myself, come on, just keep going, please keep up. And I lose sight of him, and I keep going. I felt awful. I felt like I'd abandoned somebody. This thing really, really resonated. And then the final closing note is not triumphant, it's melancholy, yet at the same time it is satisfying. This got as strong an emotional experience as I've ever gotten out of any 30, 40 hour plus game ever in my life. I'm not sure, I'm not going to say it's surpassed the emotional experience I've ever had from any other game, but it meets it pretty much anything else. And it is, if you haven't played it, know what you like. Know what you come to video games for. And if what I just described sounds to you like, it just sounds boring, it may not be for you, and that's fine. But if that sounded intriguing at all, and you have not played this game, please, I cannot recommend it enough. And seriously, it's 2.5 hours. It's a theatrical cut of a Lord of the Rings film, a length of time to play through the whole thing. That is less time than most 30-hour video games take before they stop giving you tutorials. I don't think it's a huge time commitment. I think it is well worth it, and I can't recommend it enough because it is, by a rather heavy margin, the best gaming experience I've had in the most recent generation of gaming that I have, which is the PS3 generation. is the best gaming experience I've had. And I've had other good ones, but that's the peak by a pretty big margin. So that's Journey, and why I think it's freaking awesome. So, have you played it? What are your thoughts on it? Whatever those thoughts might be, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's all the stuff to do. You know, the like and subscribe, obviously, but you can also support me on Patreon. You can follow me on Twitter. I have a podcast. I have other stuff as well. Links for all of it's down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.